The Unholy Trinity Podcast. 3 Blues, 3 Opinions, 1 Everton Podcast.
Welcome to episode 226 of the Unholy Trinity Podcast, brought to you in association with Sports Social, Europe's biggest sports podcast network, and also Fanatics. It's just me, and we're a little bit early because I did say last week we'll probably come back on Sunday to look back on Salford. However, I did say it's probably going to be a bit of a busy week at the club, and yet again, it has been on the transfer front, which is fantastic for us. Obviously, another player through the door in Jesper Lindstrøm, and obviously is a player that we don't know a great deal about. To be fair, you know, somebody who was at Napoli last season. We signed him on loan for 12 months with a view then to potentially making that deal a permanent one. So we've had to call in a bit of an expert, if we can call him that, and that's also somebody from obviously the Sports Social Podcast Network as well, co-host of the Anglo Italian Podcast, and that's Adam Gipki. Adam, how are you on this as we record today, this Friday evening?
Yeah, very good, and thank you very much for calling me an expert. It's one of those nice kind of perks, I suppose, as well. But yeah, keeping well, thank you. And yeah, this kind of news sort of antipifies, I suppose, what's going on in Serie A. We've got a lot of transfer business taking place, mainly driven by the factors of the growth decree. So for those that don't know, in Italy, there was a kind of tax privilege for a lot of the purchases that Italian clubs did last year. That's been since taken away from Italian clubs, and they're having to balance the books, and inevitably a lot of the clubs are having to kind of move on players in a kind of competitive manner at the moment. So they're trying to juggle as best as they can. Obviously, sustainability is the key here as well. So you probably have seen the likes of Juventus, for example, ship a lot of their high earners recently. But in this case, obviously, I suppose with the Jesper Lindstrøm transfer, it's an interesting one because I think this was a signing primarily driven by the chairman, so Aurelio De Laurentiis, who brought him to the club at Napoli. A lot of high hope if you look at the clips that you saw at Eintracht Frankfurt, and there was a lot of hype around him, certainly. But unfortunately, it was kind of the circus of, I suppose, Napoli last season. They kind of collapsed in terms of their kind of title defense, the worst kind of title defense of any team really in Serie A history. So that kind of antipifies, I suppose, why Jesper really did struggle. Not to mention, I suppose, he's had 3 managers in that whole season. So he never really got a chance. He didn't really come off the bench with a lot of effects in a lot of those games. Started off, for example, a few games in before he actually got a taste for Serie A. And I think it was a combination of maybe the style of the tactics that were deployed by the various managers, but also, I suppose, the pace of the game in Italy. I think that really caught him unaware. And he's one of those players that I looked at, you know, from his Eintracht Frankfurt days and thought, you know, there's potential here, but unfortunately it just didn't work out for him. And I suppose the best analogy that I can give for his situation is wrong club, wrong time, potentially. He's a player that definitely has potential, I would say, but unfortunately to the Napoli faithful, they didn't really see the best of him, which is unfortunate because you'll see a lot of the clips going around virally about him taking on his kind of wing back or, you know, marker, and he'll run at players. And I suppose that's probably the kind of ability that he's got, that he can take on his man. He can play alongside the various different positions in an attacking manner. So whether that be predominantly on the left-hand side or on the right-hand side, but he can also kind of play behind the striker, which I suppose gives that optionality to Sean Dyche now in terms of where he deploys him. And I suppose the kind of comparison that I could give him is maybe for those of a certain age is Dennis Rommedahl. He had the kind of hype of a player that can take on his man very fast. He's got some good end product to him, but unfortunately we just didn't get to see that at Napoli. So I suppose in summary, he's a player that can take on his man, can do that kind of taking the pressure off the defense if you give him the ball as well. And I think we saw a lot more of that in the Frankfurt kind of victory of the Europa Cup final against Rangers. So that team antipified, I suppose, what he can potentially do for Everton. So I suppose there's kind of thoughts of optimism with him. But if you ask an average Napoli fan, they'd probably say it in a derogatory term, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that when we were linked with him, I think all the talk was, well, let's forget about last season, and obviously it was a poor season. There was very little output there. Only played, I think he made 22 appearances, which is not a lot, over the course of a season. And everyone's going to look towards those couple of seasons at Frankfurt. Obviously, he won a European trophy with them. As you say, the clips which we probably all shared across our fan base are very exciting in terms of what he could bring to our side. And one thing that Everton are looking to do in this transfer window, which we've certainly done early doors, we've made 4 signings, and 2 of those signings are players in Iliman and Diane, and obviously Jesper Lindstrøm, who come in with pace. Now, one thing that Everton have lacked so much in recent years is that pace. And when we look to counter, which when Everton, obviously, we give up the ball, we don't want the ball. We're quite happy to have sort of 35, 40% possession. So when we look to counter, we do need that pace, and we've struggled massively with that. So to get him in, to get obviously in Diane, it means that we become a different proposition. And you mentioned there about where he can play. With us, obviously, we have a number 10 in obviously Decorio and Dyer, and we have obviously Jack Harrison and McNeil playing on either side of the striker in those wide positions. Where do you think his best position would be in terms of that Everton setup?
I think primarily it's going to be on the wings, because he has got that pace to burn, and I think that willingness to be direct. And I suppose that might be an element that Sean Dyche really likes about him, that he has got that directness about his play. And I suppose maybe that's a bit antagonistic of like Sean Dyche. He is kind of that, he likes the direct style of football. But I think the other element is he's quite tall. So he's 6 foot. And I suppose that might play a part in sort of the set plays. But primarily, I think he's going to be deployed as a winger. He can, like I say, intertwine, so whether that be on left or right hand side. And I think the element that will be quite pleasing to Everton fans is he's not going to be stuck on that wing, so he likes to come into the middle and change it up. And I think you can only look at the clips that he kind of performed with Frankfurt, and you can see kind of promising aspects of his game that might make maybe Everton a bit more dynamic in terms of their play, because I just think there's genuinely a player that could be unearthed. And this is potentially a really clever bit of business, given, I think, if you rewind back to when he first transferred to Napoli, there was a host of English clubs after him, the likes of Spurs, Arsenal, as well as Man United. So he had his suitors potentially. He had his eye on another Liverpool club, which I won't say too loudly on this one. But obviously, it was one of those kind of moves that I think he felt like this was an opportunity for him to play games. And it hasn't transpired. But I think with the opportunity that Dyche gives to his players, and I think with that self-belief as well, off the back of that last season, potentially there's a lot more that he can do. And obviously, he's had the preseason with Antonio Conte, who we know likes to drill in a lot of fitness. So I think going into this Everton camp for this summer, you've got potentially a really fit player that's going to give his all. But more importantly, I think get fans off the edge of their seats in that respect as well. Because I think, you guys crave someone to just, be exciting. And I think that's what he will be. There is going to be an element of, I think he will take a few games to get adapted to the pace of the game, especially in the Premier League. But look, I think there's promising signs from what he did in his early days at Brøndby to obviously what he delivered at Frankfurt as well. So, whilst I'm not saying a lot about Napoli, because unfortunately he didn't really kind of light up the atmosphere down there, there is context, unfortunately. There is that context of, look, they had 3 managers, 3 different philosophies going on there. Latterly with Calzona, for example, much more of a kind of back to Spalletti style of football, which was a 4-3-3 manner. And again, that doesn't really allow a player like Lindstrøm to be explored and maybe utilised, especially when you've got the players like Kvaratskhelia, for example, who are kind of staples of that Napoli squad as well. So it's going to be hard to displace someone like Kvaratskhelia in that squad. But look, I think for Everton, they've potentially got a bargain because, as we say, it's a loan deal, not obligatory to buy him, but I think at the fee potentially it's quite a bargain in kind of these days kind of terms of like what you'd spend on a player like of his caliber as well. So a lot of hope for Everton fans, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think the fee. I think there's a loan fee about €3 million, and then if you want to make it permanent, it goes to between 20 and 22 million euros. Which, like you say, in the grand scheme of things in modern football, for somebody who's 24 years of age, still a young player. You know, he's a Danish 100%. International, of course. He's been to a variety of clubs in different countries, so he's got that experience as well. Obviously, playing in European competition as well. So I think it could be a masterstroke. Fills one of our loan slots for the season as well. I think he seems excited to be here. Obviously, a frustrating time for him last season, as you discussed there. Many reasons for that. But he seems to be excited to get a bit of a fresh start. He's got eyes on playing in a new stadium as well. Obviously, in 12 months' time, he was talking about that in his interview today. And it's somebody you mentioned the clubs that he was linked to before you moved to Napoli. You mentioned, Liverpool we're one of those clubs, and Tottenham and Arsenal and Newcastle. So when you've got those kind of clubs who are effectively Champions League fighting clubs every single season, you know that there's certainly a player there. And let's not forget, Napoli won the league and they signed him. So, a side looking to defend their title, they thought that he was good enough for that side as well. So I think there's plenty of positives, I think, as Everton fans, to sort of look at the sign and think, this could be one that really, really works for us. It could be a little bit of a bargain. And the signing after 12 months, for the price which is being quoted, could also be a bargain as well. Yeah. And it's somebody, you say there, he's an exciting player, and for us, I mean, I think we refer to them as seat clickers. The famous, when someone carries the ball and you hear the click of the seats going up as everyone's on their feet, and we think that and Dyche sort of like that as well, carries the ball well and carries it at pace. And that's what really excites us. I mean, did you see much of that? I know obviously it wasn't a great time at Napoli. Was there any times that he did actually have a good game, of a decent performance, and show what he's all about over at Napoli?
I think it was very hard to judge his time at Napoli. I think there was moments in his game where he did show promise, and I suppose there's a few kind of games that I'd reminisce against the likes of Hellas Verona, which is kind of considered, I suppose, a lower team in Serie A. But there was one particular game where he was constantly taking on his wing back. And I suppose with the style of football, especially in Italy, where they traditionally play with three centre backs, for example, that allows those kind of wingers to exploit those wing back positions. And, Jesper had kind of a field day on those occasions. But to be brutally honest, obviously, a lot of the times that he was brought on is kind of giving him 15, maybe 10 minutes to run at teams. And, I suppose the majority of the times that Jesper was deployed was in games where they were chasing games. They were already losing them. So it was very hard for me to kind of pinpoint a particular game, unfortunately, due to the circumstances. If you ask most Serie A fans, they'll probably kind of say, yeah, unfortunately, he just didn't deliver on those occasions. But like I say, I think the context is he had three different managers. One in Rudy Garcia, for example, that was kind of a disciplinarian. He kind of tried to change the mold of Napoli and wasn't really favoured by the Napoli faithful. Then Aurelio De Laurentiis brought on back his favourite, which was Walter Mazzarri. Some people will know about his spell at Watford. And again, it didn't really pan out too well. I suppose with Calzona latterly, he's a disciple of Spalletti, someone that was known by the club, playing a bit more kind of total football. And he got to kind of come on a lot more often in those games. But yeah, all I would reflect on is potentially that Hellas Verona game where I potentially would say, yeah, he took on his wing back man and he was running at him constantly. There is definitely a clip that's going around where you can see he's hugging the kind of touchline and he's constantly just running at him. So I think from my point of view, have a look at that one. But otherwise, there's a lot of action that you can see from Frankfurt where there's that kind of anticipation. You know what you're going to get out of him as well. And he's obviously someone that's fancied by the Danish national side as well. So I think you'll see a lot more of him potentially playing for the national side going forward as well.
Yeah, and obviously we know that Sean Dyche likes his wingers and his wide men to work back as well to cover the fullback. Dwight McNeil and Jack Harrison are both expected to do that. What's he like defensively? It sounds probably a bit of a strange thing to say, but as I say, it's an important part of the Sean Dyche setup. Does he track back? Is he a fit lad? Does he work hard? Is that in his game?
Yeah, I mean, I would say he's one that will contribute in terms of getting his body on the line, so to speak. Someone that will do his defensive duties. I think he's possibly one that I would expect to be kind of anticipating that through ball, so on the counter attack more so than maybe doing a lot of that defensive work. But I have seen that element to him on various occasions with Napoli as well. So I don't think he will shy away from it. One thing I will say, he's definitely fit, without a shadow of a doubt. He's bombing up those wings when he can. And I think from that point of view, you want someone that's going to be full of stamina, especially for the system that maybe Dyche will deploy against certain teams as well. I potentially might see him potentially being explored as an option off the bench at times as well, just for that impact sometimes. And I think that will help stretch the game a lot more and potentially put in the favour of Everton. But yeah, he can do that aspect. I mean, I've seen various occasions where he did it for Frankfurt. But yeah, for Napoli, probably it's harder to kind of pinpoint a potential game where he really did that. But I would say definitely fit. He'll kind of do what you need him to do. And I don't think he'll shy away from it. That's for sure.
Yeah, like you say, he's gone through pre-season so far under Conte, and he's obviously one who certainly expects his players to be fit. And he's missed the famous Sean Dyche Gaffer's Day as well, which was held at the start of this week, which I'm sure he'll be delighted about as well, because he runs the players very, very, very hard. That's for sure. But we're from our side, we're all, as I said at the start, we're all excited by this signing and by what the club are doing, because we certainly feel that if we had a bit more pace in the side over the last couple of years, we maybe wouldn't have been where we were. I mean, Sean Dyche, did particularly well last season, considering the points deductions that we suffered and the off the field issues, and the fact that he was a spokesman, he was facing all the questions, and we still achieved a decent points totally if you take the deductions away, and would have been comfortably away from that bottom three. So I think that if we have a new dimension to this side with the. We had the fourth best defence in the Premier League. We were solid at the back, very good goalkeeper, two fantastic centre halves, and improving Mykolenko. So I think that this kind of signing for us, and it won't be the last in terms of, I think, players with pace. There's lots of links to Willie Gnonto, with a long-time target.
Yes.
Obviously only 20 years of age, but another player who's electric. He can carry the ball and bring something totally different to that side. But I think from our perspective, this kind of sign is something which is a real positive, and hopefully, the time at Napoli can be quickly forgotten.
Definitely. Yeah, I think this is an opportunity for Lindstrøm, more importantly, to kick off his career again, show the promise that he did at Frankfurt. And I think potentially maybe the Premier League will suit him better. I kind of see the Bundesliga very closely, kind of more of a fit to the Premier League in some respects. But yeah, I suppose the other element that he'll get from his experience in Italy is maybe the tactical aspects, those kind of little time management pieces, which I'm sure will be favourable to Everton's fans if they're winning games as well. But from my point of view, he's a player that's got raw ability. I think if Dyche deploys him in the right manner, and if the player himself can just go out there and enjoy his football again, then potentially, like I say, Everton have got a winner, because, like I say, for the fee that's potentially involved, I think that's a no-brainer if potentially you can unearth that player that we saw at Frankfurt, because that Frankfurt team was special when they went all the way to the final against Rangers and won it. And to an extent, I think he was probably not as famous compared to the likes of Daichi Kamada, who now plays for Crystal Palace, and the likes of Kostic, who is on that wing back position as well. But Lindstrøm does offer a lot of kind of ability, and I think there was moments where he took on defences and scared the likes of Barcelona one night in that UEFA Cup run, or Europa Cup run, should I say. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for Everton to be really excited about this signing. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's a low value gamble. It's probably the best way to look at it as well. You know,
100%.
so we're excited, and you know, as you say, whether it's off the bench, you know, the chances are he's going to have to probably work his way into the side, because I fully expect day one against Brighton, you'll see Dwight McNeil and Jack Harrison start in those wide positions.
Yes.
But you know, it will certainly give him something to work towards, and to have players even, you know, early on in the season who can come off the bench and make a difference and frighten, you know, tiring fullbacks or wing backs. That's something that we've not had. So certainly something which we're looking forward to. And I really appreciate your insights as well, especially, you know, we get somebody who's seen a lot more of them than we have. And you certainly get added fuel to our excitement. That's for sure.
Well, fingers crossed. Like I say, I think there's a player to be unearthed there, but like I say, possibly wrong club. He was in Napoli, wrong timing in his career, but there's a player there, that's for sure.
Appreciate it, and I really appreciate you taking a bit of time on a Friday night as well, whilst the Olympics opening ceremony is going on in the rain in Paris as we speak. But thanks for taking some time off this evening as well.
No worries.
And that is us for today in this little small version of the podcast, not as long as normal, but I think it's important to get something out and get some insight on any players that come through the door to Goodison Park. Obviously, a busy weekend, Salford tomorrow. We've also then got Coventry on Tuesday, so we'll be back ourselves next weekend to look back on those games and look ahead as well to what's to come, and hopefully more players through the door. Who knows? Everton could be making a European charge ourselves. You just never know. The hope is certainly there. So we will catch you next weekend.
The Unholy Trinity Podcast. 3 Blues, 3 opinions, 1 Everton podcast.